Hello, my name is Gail Seiler, and I'm honored to be here representing Betrayal Project USA. We are a victim led organization dedicated to exposing institutional and medical betrayal, honoring those who are lost, and pursuing justice for crimes committed under the guise of public health. You can learn more about our work, the stories we have out there. Submit your own story or learn how to get involved by visiting betrayalprojectusa.org. You can follow us on Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, and get all of our social media, including our Substack, on our website at betrayalprojectusa.org. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Lisa, whose father was killed in hospice in Ohio, correct? So,
Yes.
Lisa, tell us about your dad, Bill.
Oh gosh, there's not enough time in the day. He was great. He was an amazing, humble, gentle man. Strong believer in God. Just since the day he was born. I always joke around with people and they say, "What's one of your best memories of your father?" And I'm sorry. I've been emotional this past couple of months. I grew up in a Catholic school, Catholic high school. And you know how you go to a Catholic grade school and high school, you go to church like 3 times a week. And then when there's holy days, it's almost 5 days a week.
Yep, I'm Catholic.
And,
I get it.
right. And darn if my dad, I would tell him, "Dad, I already went to church today with school." "No, we're going tonight." So, and then every Sunday faithfully. And then if it was sometimes Saturday and Sunday, and it was I just dreaded it. And I got to the point where I turned 16 years old or 17, and I was able to go to church with my friends at a different church that was more geared to the teenagers. That was only for half an hour. And what I would do is I would tell my dad, "I'm going to church at St. Jude's. I don't need to go to St. Martin's with you today." Yeah. And he goes, "You better go." And darn if he would catch me at a friend's house or hiding. So I have to go back to church with him. But you know what? Those are treasured memories now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just beautiful memories. And, I give anything to go to church with him again.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing, because not only was he a father who believed in protecting your body and your mind, but your soul too, and that's always a beautiful thing. And
Yes.
Yeah, he looks like he was that kind of a guy, and he was in the military, right?
Yes, he was a Vietnam vet. He actually had a Purple Heart. He had been, it's morbid to say, but I say, yeah, my dad survived getting shot in the head for the Vietnam War, but he was killed by some morally unethical, corrupted nurses. So, he was able to escape Vietnam alive, but he wasn't able to escape being murdered.
Yeah, exactly.
At 67.
That's the shame.
If you think about it, he was fairly young.
Oh, yeah. Definitely young. So tell us about your dad, his diagnoses and
Sure.
how he came to be in hospice.
My father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 2014. He went through chemotherapy. I do believe you have a picture of him in the hospital. That was 2014, a year before he was murdered. You see he's healthy looking, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Successfully went through it all and was in remission. And then around March, that picture's from 2014. In March of 2015, it had returned. but the doctor was positive about it, said, I think we have a really good chance at beating this again. We're going to get through the same process again. And, the sad thing about it, though, is that I was actively involved in my parents' lives all my life. I noticed in 2014, though, and I can remember the year 2014, not only because of my father having cancer and going into remission, but I had a really bad car accident. But my mom started going down. My mother, long story short, I had a mother that was mentally ill all our lives. And my father, being the old school Catholic Christian that he was, divorce was not an option. He took his marriage vow seriously. He knew she never worked a day in her life. So he knew, I can't divorce her. She would not make it, all that good stuff. Old school Christian. Her mental health had gone downhill horribly, and it was really going bad in 2014. And there was an incident in 2014 where a Green Township police officer who used to be a neighbor of ours actually responded to a 911 call that my mother made in 2014, early 2014. My mother liked to play the eternal victim. She hated my father my mother, now that I know the term better, my mother was a narcissist. I have a brother, and it was always, she liked one time, she liked one of us at one time, and she would hate the other child. My brother, to escape my mother, moved all the way out to California. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. My mother would try to pit us all against each other. She tried to, get my father against us, and it never worked. He would never go against us. It was just the way our lives were. And my mother, during one of her crazy instances, called 911 and said my father was following her around the house, and she wanted an officer there. Oh, and she also accused me and my father of beating her up. My neighbor, his name is Mike. He used to live, him and his wife and his child used to live next door to my parents, and they had a house built and moved. So I knew Mike for a good 10, 12 years. He actually heard the call on the radio and came to the house, and he calmed my mother down, and he didn't make any arrests or anything. He knew my mother. I saw Mike in 2016 after my father was murdered, told him everything. And he said, yeah, your mom, I could tell she was going downhill mentally badly. And he, his first thing he said, he got emotional. He said, it's a damn shame. Your father was a good man. Because I told him, I said, Mike, she did it finally. She had him killed. And I gave him more details. And it's like, your dad was a damn good man, his exact words. But her mental health was getting worse. While my dad was going through his treatments, my mother had, to give you an idea, my mother has had Crohn's disease since she was 28 years old. And she was on all kinds of drugs. Usually she was on painkillers, but she also was on steroids, a lot of drugs for her Crohn's disease. And I do believe not only did my mother and her sisters, all my aunts are crazy too, but not to the extent where they're a murderer. But my mother, they were all mentally ill. None of them had husbands. They all got smart and left, except my father. And my mother's mental health got really bad. And then on top of that, her Crohn's was acting up. So she actually went into the hospital and had a surgery. And then she actually recuperated at the facility that killed my father. My mother met the nursing director a year before my father was there. And became buddy with the nursing director. But also in the meantime, too, my mother was going down mentally and was trying to alienate me and my father against each other, which of course would never work. And it got to the point where, of course, I spoke to my father every day on the phone. I'd have to sneak to visit him because my mother, her schedule was she would stay awake all night until about 7 or 8 in the morning. And then she would take enough painkillers to knock out a horse. And she would sleep until 7 or 8 p.m. that night. So I would see my father during the day while she was sleeping. And I would also, me and my ex-boyfriend would meet my father at church. And we would meet him for Sunday night church at St. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, one day, and I can remember this timeline very well, back in May of 2015. My dad's, I was on his HIPAA list, and I had gone to these doctor visits with my mother and my father. But then I guess my mother was starting the plan of withdrawing my dad from treatment. And a nurse named Susie from my dad's PTI and his blood doctor called me. Susie called me one day because I was on his HIPAA list and said, Lisa, your father has missed numerous appointments. Dr. Lunenburg is going to take him off of his blood thinners if he does not make it to his next PTINR appointment. And I said, well, I didn't even know this was happening, Susie. She goes, find out what's going on. Let me know and make sure that your father makes it to his next appointment. So I called my dad. I said, Dad, what is going on? He goes, nothing. What are you doing? And I said, Dad, Susie from Dr. Lunenburg's office just called me and said you've been missing your PTINR appointments for your blood thinners. What's going on? He said, Lisa, I'm not missing any of my appointments. Your mother handles my appointments. And then he said, Carol, he was talking to her in the background. He's like, Carol, Lisa said the doctor's office called her and said, I'm missing appointments. Are you not giving me my appointments? My mother took the phone from my father and said, I forget what she said exactly. She said something along the lines, it wasn't nice though, but along the lines of, this doesn't concern you. And she hung up on me. So it was too late in the evening to call Susie back because the doctor's offices closed early during the day. And I called Susie next day, and I spoke to her and she said, Lisa, your mother came up here today. She obviously knew about me talking with you about your father missing your appointments. She has removed you from your father's HIPAA list, and I can no longer talk to you. And I said, Susie, you have to talk. I was telling her, I explained to her, I said, Susie, my mother's mentally ill. You can't just take me off my father's HIPAA list per her saying this. I said, my father would never remove me from his HIPAA list. And I even called him. I was talking to her on a regular landline, and I called him on the cell phone. He's like, no, I never removed you. And I asked, I said, Dad, Mom removed me from your HIPAA list. I never said for her to do that. And Susie goes, Lisa, I've got you removed. I can't speak to you. And that was the end of the conversation.
Wow. So your dad didn't even have a say-so in his own
health.
That's weird.
You would think that the doctor, what the doctor's office did was unethical because they should have never allowed her to go in that office alone and to remove me from his HIPAA list.
Right.
But I think you said that earlier, Lisa, you said that earlier, that he would not get in between your mother when she was trying to, build a case against you or your brother, and she was trying to manipulate. And I think your dad was just a gentleman, and he didn't want to upset the apple cart. So she just did whatever she did, and he went along with it,
And you know what, Marshall, you just described him 100% to a T. Yeah. He was so humble. She was a constant source of embarrassment. Years later, I found out when I was getting all the medical records from numerous doctors that one of the doctors that she had seen when she had been doctor shopping before the final doctor, the one that put him in hospice, and declared him incompetent. I mean, I think you all know the way that this goes. You find it, you shop around for a doctor that will do what you want.
Right.
And the doctor, Dr. Pranshnath Arkasab declared my father incompetent, said my father had advanced dementia. He lied. He falsified medical records, yet my father was driving a car and knew my phone number by heart. And from what I understand, I had a grandfather who had advanced dementia, and he actually couldn't even speak or even get out of a chair or feed himself, anything. But, you shop around for the right doctor. She was doctor shopping, and one of my dad's regular doctor had to have my mother kicked out of the doctor's office because he refused to sign a paperwork saying my father was incompetent. And she started screaming, acting the way Carol acts. And he had her leave the office. And my dad, in the meantime, was mortified as usual by my mother's antics and apologizing to the whole staff and and the doctor for my mother's behavior.
Which shows he's competent. Which shows he was competent.
Right. But he got it. Yeah, he got back in the car though and had to drive him and herself home. But she eventually found a doctor that would assist in her lies.
Wow. So was this picture I have up, was this the start of his?
Well, no, this is actually jumping a little bit ahead. What happened is in June, I talked to my father every Sunday. I saw him at church. I talked to my father every day. When he didn't show up for church on a Sunday night, I was calling him, and his cell phone was turned off. I called the house. There was no answer. I couldn't get a hold of my father on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, I'm freaking out, calling the house. I don't know if I ever told you this, Marcia. I had actually sent a Green Township officer there to do a wellness check to check on my father because nobody would answer the phone. The officer called me back afterwards. He goes, I spoke to your mother. I'm not allowed to give any information, but your mother is there at the house, and that's all I can say. I thought, because my mom, her ammo was to go around to anyone that would listen to her and not give me information because she said I was insane. And I was estranged from the family and had not been a part of their lives for years, which was a bold-faced lie.
Right.
My mom liked to play victim. My father and I beat her up. My brother was a horrible person and all that stuff. So she was the eternal victim. So when I couldn't get hold of my dad on Monday.
That did not happen. You and your dad did not beat her up.
Yeah, right. Mike knew better. He knew she was a lunatic. Then I called around to hospitals on Monday. I didn't know if my dad was in a morgue or what. Mm-hmm. So I'm calling around to the local hospitals, and nobody would give me any information. And finally, the receptionist, one of the telephone operators at Mercy Hospital said, I can't say whether your father is a patient here or not. And that was the most information I got from someone. So I knew automatically he was at Mercy Health because that's where his doctor practiced out of. And I said, is my father in the morgue or is he there? She goes, I can't give you any information. The only thing I can tell you is the social services is already gone for the day. You can call back tomorrow and ask for social services. So I called back the next morning. Of course, I'm going crazy. Come Tuesday, don't know if my dad's dead or alive. I called there Tuesday morning, just frantic and upset. And a social service worker told me, she said, all I can tell you, he is here. We've been instructed by the POA to not give any information to any family. I can tell you he's not in the morgue. So I said, well, I'm coming up there and I'm going to see my father. She said, your mother has specific rules that no one is to know about. No one is to have any information regarding your father. He's not in the morgue, but nobody is to be given any information per the POA. And right then and there, I was like, oh my God. So I'm going through a week of not being able to go to Mercy Hospital to hear about my father, to know what's going on. Finally, on Thursday, in the afternoon, my mother had called my boyfriend. This is around 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And she said, I've taken the restriction off of Lisa's father. She can go see him now. And John's like, what's going on, Carol? What are you doing? You know, he's upset. He's frantic. And she just hung up on him. So, of course, John calls me. She didn't call me. She called John. So me and John rush up to Mercy Hospital. And I'm given, you know, the restrictions are taken off. Family is allowed to see him. And I spoke to a very nice nurse who was one of the nicest nurses. And her eyes were as big as saucers, to be honest with you. And she was kind of frazzled. I said, what is going on? And I saw my dad sitting in a hospital bed. She goes, I just had to have security walk your mother out of the hospital about a couple of hours ago. Your mother was in here screaming, just screaming at your father because he wanted to go home. And I had to have security walk her out. So my mother got kicked out of Mercy Hospital. Come to find out from Stacy. Stacy was the nurse. Stacy told me that she was looking through the records. My father was admitted on Sunday evening to Mercy Hospital. She literally dropped him off at the emergency room and left. He was complaining about stomach issues. So she just dropped my father off, called the hospital back, and told them not to give any information to the hospital. Why the hospital allowed this kind of of this to happen? Like, why didn't they notify social services? Why didn't they notify the police? But my father was having stomach issues. Looking back on it, and this is speculation, but my father had bowel obstruction. Now, I don't know if you know much about Crohn's disease, but my mother would take medication to Crohn's disease. You can have an accident at any time. So she had medication and would just take tons of it to more or less, I know this sounds gross, but to stop her up. So if she was to go out in public, it would stop the need to have to go to the bathroom. I personally, I don't have proof of this. I think she gave my father a bunch of that, and he had to have bowel obstruction on well, like I said, I got into the hospital on Thursday, got to see him. He said he was fine. He wanted to go home. More or less, the nursing staff and everything was in lingo. Couldn't do anything because of her. She called all the shots. Even though they had just kicked her out, they couldn't discharge my father without the spouse's permission. Can you imagine that? You're a grown man and you can't leave a hospital because your spouse has to call the shots. But
especially when you can make the decisions for yourself.
Right. And
well, not to be able, I mean, because he can't drive himself. And obviously she had taken his cell phone. He didn't have a cell phone with him.
Correct.
Right? Because she was calling all the shots and left him there.
Cell phone, his wallet, you name it. But, and like I said, how the hospital failed my father and didn't get the police involved is beyond me. But Friday around 11, I get a call from Stacy saying, Lisa, your father needs to go into surgery. The bowel obstruction is really bad. We need to get your permission. We need to get your verbal permission to perform surgery. I was like, wait a second. What is going on? You know, I just can't tell you, go ahead. She is, Lisa, we cannot get a hold of your mother. We've left so many messages telling her to call us. She won't answer the calls. We need you to give verbal permission for your father to have emergency surgery for bowel obstruction. I called my uncle. He said, Lisa, just do it. Because my uncle, my dad's brother, he lived in New Orleans. He knows how crazy my mom was. He knew the antics of my mother, but he said, Lisa, you just get the permission. And the Hospitals, he said, the hospital must be telling the truth, Lisa, which I now know the hospitals do not tell the truth.
Right.
For all I know, that was a bogus surgery. So he has surgery. Of course, I'm rushing out of work to go. Me and my boyfriend, he left work. I left work. We waited for him to get out of surgery. We're up there with him. It was the start of the nightmare because it got so bad. And Marcia, I had sent you the social services records. Social services was trying to discharge my father after surgery and stuff, but my mother would not answer the phone to come up there to pick him up. And I mean, we're talking days after the surgery. And it got to the point where one of the social service workers called me days afterwards and said, and I'm here spending the night there at the hospital. Great. It got to the point where social services couldn't get a hold of my father. They finally, I gave the notes to Marcia, but at one point, I don't know if you have this note in there, Marcia, but in the social services notes from the hospital, but they said that they said to me physically, my mother had until 5 p.m. to call them. And if she didn't respond, they would release him to me.
Right.
Okay. Well, guess what? She found out about that somehow and rushed up there. And her and my son, yes, my son, her grandson, went up there. They met with Dr. Kassav. And Dr. Kassav, who was only my dad's primary care physician, not the doctor that did the surgery, none of that, for the bowel obstruction. Dr. Kassav, as his primary care physician, was able to meet with my mother and agree to put my father in hospice per my mother's request. And her grandson. My son and my mother met with Dr. Kassav and didn't include me or my father. Mind you, me and my father were not in this conversation. It was between 3 people, Dr. Kassav, my mother, and my son. And they were able to make the decision to put my father in hospice. Now, my mother, in the meantime, left a voicemail on my phone, which I still have, and had said, Lisa, we're putting your father in a rehabilitation place. He's not being put in a nursing home. He's only going there for physical therapy. That's what happens after you have surgery. You go to a facility, to a rehab facility to have to rehab, to get some meat on your bones, to do physical therapy. Also I found out later that my mother was met with Hospice of Cincinnati. I have a strong feeling about hospice, as you do too, but I will say this about Hospice of Cincinnati. Hospice of Cincinnati has a better track record than most hospice groups. They don't put people in hospice against their will. Contacted Hospice of Cincinnati after my father was murdered. I had contacted Hospice of Cincinnati because they were in the medical records. My mother and my son had met with a hospice nurse and tried to get my father admitted into hospice. And it was noted in Hospice of Cincinnati's medical records that my father was not a candidate for hospice. So, besides my mother doctor shopping, and she had found Dr. Kassav, who had been my dad's PCP for over a year, she and my son were then hospice shopping for a hospice group. I said, do you know anything about Optum Hospice? Because Optum Hospice is the one that the nursing home, like I said, this is after my father was killed. And I was executive of my father's estate as far as his medical records went. And I had the court documentation, and Hospice of Cincinnati spoke with me. And I told them, I said, do you know anything about Optum Hospice? Because since you guys didn't put him in, the nursing home found Optum Hospice, and the nurse got real quiet. She was like, yeah, I know Optum Hospice. And I said, what do you know about them? I said, they put my dad in hospice and murdered him without his permission. And she said, all I can say to you is Google Optum Hospice. So after we got off the phone, I Googled Optum Hospice. Optum Hospice back in 2016 was found guilty of Medicare fraud because 2 nurses had turned them in for making them they did it under the Qui Tam Act. And I could be saying that incorrectly, but what that is, it provides when you're a whistleblower and you report a hospital doctor or, hospice group, 2 nurses reported them under the Qui Tam Act and said that Optum Hospice was making them put people in hospice who were not terminal. And Optum Hospice had to pay millions of dollars to the Department of Justice because they were found guilty. Now, here's what kills me. Optum Hospice was found guilty of putting people who were not terminally ill into hospice, right?
Right.
They didn't go to the Department of Justice didn't prosecute them for murder. They prosecuted them for Medicare funds.
Yeah.
Right.
For money.
For taking money from the government.
Exactly. Not murder.
Right.
Not humanity, not life.
Yeah.
So now when he first went to the rehab facility from the hospital, he was in there, and when he first went in there, they started giving him Haldol. Now, he's in there for rehabilitation, and they're giving him Haldol. And at this time, they're
Marsha,
saying,
can I interrupt you for a quick second?
Yes.
The first night he was there, because I didn't see him the first night he was there. I saw him the next day. And what happens when you're being discharged from a hospital, they take you from ambulance to the rehab facility. They had drugged him so badly the first day he was there that he fell in. Now, he was allowed in his room that day. He fell in his room and had a gash on his forehead. And I found this, not only did I see my father with this gash in his forehead, and I talked to him about it, but I also spoke to a woman from across the hall who begged me not to tell anyone, but she had actually found my dad in a pool of blood and had alerted Katie Teak that this man's in a pool of blood in his room, right? So when I saw my dad the next day, I said, Dad, what happened to your forehead? Oh, I just had a fall, Lisa. It's nothing. I said, what happened? Because it looked bad. And I even have a picture. I wish I had given you the picture, Marsha, but he's sitting in a wheelchair. Now, mind you, Gail, my father could walk, but he was not allowed to get out of a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. They said that my father was not, and this is part of the strategy of hospice. They will not let you do any kind of physical exertion as a way of ruining your body. So my father was not allowed to physically get out of his wheelchair. And if he did, they would give him Roxanol, which is liquid morphine. I had to tell my dog to stop, but they would give him Roxanol to if he would dare to stand up in his wheelchair. And right there, as you can see, he's drugged heavily. Mm-hmm. And we were documenting it. And only time he was allowed in his private Medicare room that Medicare was paying for, he was not allowed in that room except with visitors. Oh, wow. Other than that, he was to sit in a wheelchair at the nurse's station on display for everybody to see 24/7. He was not allowed this is actually towards the end of it. This is a different type of wheelchair where he could actually lay his legs out more. He was in, and this is, all these things come back to me. He was in a wheelchair that looked like it was ready to fall apart. And me and my boyfriend actually went to a local medical supply place, and I was going to buy a wheelchair that was in better shape than the one that they put my father in. And guess what? My mother denied that request. I was going to pay for a wheelchair, but no, they had my father in this clunky, old, worn out wheelchair that probably should have been thrown out, but they kept my father in this wheelchair strapped. When my dad would have visitors, like his cousins or his work buddies, they would come up there to play cards with him and stuff. He was not allowed out of that wheelchair. He was never allowed out. That he could never lay in a bed. He was forced to physically sit in a wheelchair. And if he dared got up to stretch his limbs, because you know your limbs go numb after sitting in a chair 24/7, they would give him Roxanol. And one night when my boyfriend went up there to see my dad, because I was working late, my boyfriend had more flexible hours. He didn't have to be at his job. He could travel. So my boyfriend was able to frequently go there 3 or 4 times during the day before I would get there in the evening. And one time he got there, and my dad was sitting at the nurse station in a wheelchair, of course. And he got up to stretch, and he said, "Hey, John," got all excited to see my dad. And one of the nurses, Sarah, ran over to him and right away gave him some kind of liquid thing. And she actually looked at my boyfriend and said to him, "We give him this when he tries to stand up in that wheelchair." Oh. And shortly after, a few minutes later, my dad fell asleep. Anytime we would bring food up there to my father, because, you know, nursing home food is trash. Mm-hmm. Anytime we would bring food, we would get, you know, Frisch's, we would get any kind of restaurant, you know, and if you can tell in the background, that's food that we got from a restaurant. And guess what? When we would get there with food, they would all of a sudden, my dad have to take medication. And then he'd become a zombie. One Sunday, they went around. It was a Sunday evening, about 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening. And we were there with my father. And all of a sudden, all the residents got this. And I had taken a picture of it too. But these residents were given this concoction. And I noticed they're all falling asleep. And my father was forced to take the concoction. And my dad started getting nauseous and throwing up. And I even said to him, I said, "What are you giving my father?" Per the POA, we don't have to tell you. Wow. And he got physically ill. He threw up, and we held a garbage can up to him to throw up in.
Do you know now what it was?
No, but I had taken a picture of it, but I for the life of me, I don't know where that picture is, but it was something in a little cup, and it looked like a paste.
Well, I can tell you, I looked at Lisa's records at length, and throughout they talked about towards, you know, the middle of this, Lisa, that he would get nauseous and he would throw up. And this would be shortly after they had given him the Ativan and the morphine. So they would do that. At first, they started the Haldol immediately when he got there, which to me, Haldol is for people with Tourette syndrome or mental illnesses, bipolar. And they started giving him Haldol. Well, it would make him dizzy, it would make him nauseous, and it would agitate him because that drug will do that. And they would say that he is alert but confused. And I think that they did that because they were trying to prove that he had dementia. Well, exactly. Just because you have dementia does not mean you need to be given Ativan, Haldol, and morphine.
Right. There's a black warning label on Haldol that you are not to give this to people with any kind of dementia, Alzheimer's, or whatever. But you know what? My father didn't have dementia. And that's the funny thing, too. They used that as an excuse to declare my father incompetent also. My father had mild memory loss. My father and Marsha, I just sent you a picture to your cell phone. I found the picture of what they gave him, and a picture of him throwing up, not a picture of him throwing up, but a picture of him wiping his mouth because he got nauseous from it. But there's the picture of the drug that they gave him, and it was some kind of paste substance in a tiny cup. And there he is.
It looks like ice cream.
It does, but it's a drug. But my father, right out of work, my dad worked for the post office in maintenance. He worked all his life. My father, if you have dementia or any of that sort of thing, you can't work a job. You can't support your family. You can't pay for the expensive drugs for your wife that is needed for her Crohn's disease. You can't pay mortgages and all of that.
Or drive.
My father had mild memory loss, right? He had mild memory loss. He did not have any kind of dementia. But it was used against him to declare him incompetent, giving my mother full power as POA to make him a DNR and to also forge his signature on a do not resuscitate paper along with her. My father's signature was forged, and then she signed on it. And right next to her name, she wrote POA. My mother had been coached by Jennifer Ball, the nursing director, on what language to use. And Jennifer told her that she, as a power of attorney, you make all the shots. We don't have to tell Lisa anything. You can do everything. You can determine to put him in this rehab facility. You can put him in hospice and all that stuff.
Well, talk about the time that you had called down there because you just wanted a wellness check on him.
On July 22nd, because are you talking about when I called 911?
Yes.
Yes.
Because that's important, that place.
Right. Gail, back in, and I could have some of my dates incorrect, but either July 22nd or July 27th, I had a friendly relationship with the woman across the hall, the one that originally found him in a pool of his own blood on the first night he was there after they drugged him. But she would beg me, please do not let them know that I'm telling you any of this. She was scared, but she gave me her cell phone number, and she's got mine. And she called me one night, like at 2:00 in the morning. She said, Lisa, your father's at the nurse's station, slumped over. I think he's dead. And I was like, is anybody doing? I mean, of course I'm freaking out.
Sure.
My heart's pounding out of my chest. I called up there. Nobody's answering. They locked the doors at 11:00 every evening, so I knew they wouldn't let me in. So I called up there. Nobody's answering. Of course, I'm not going to, give away my witness to who's telling me this. So I called 911, and I said that a man is slumped over in a chair. No nurses are helping him. He needs attendance. You need to get an ambulance there. And 911 operator asked me my name, and I said my name was Mary. Because, my father had told me every time, my father weeks before said, Lisa, every time because I was making complaints with the state of Ohio. I was making complaints with the Ohio Attorney General. I was making complaints with any office and they had social services up there and stuff doing investigations, which, by the way, is a joke because the state of Ohio, they don't care. They would do as a formal thing that they would do an investigation, but found nothing wrong. But I had called 911, used a false name because my father told me before, Lisa, every time you make a complaint, I pay for it. And I was just, what's happening. He was getting beat up and stuff. And there was a nurse aide there by the name of Tiny. Her nickname was Tiny. And she was this 6'5" big woman who intimidated, bullied, and would hurt the residents. And my dad was a victim of hers because my dad told John, and we knew it. So they sent an ambulance there. Now, mind you, Gail, this is July 22nd or 27th. I can't remember the day exactly. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but that was just remember that date, July 22nd or 29th. My father was killed on August 13th. On August 14th, the day after they killed my father, the nursing home owner, Aaron Kibble, had his lawyer, Brian Goldwasser, have me served with a letter from the nursing home saying if I did not remove all of the social content that I have on social media, including Facebook, the pictures that we had taken, and all of the other stories, everything we were saying on social media. If I did not remove all of that off of social media by August 18th, mind you, my father was killed on the 13th. They came to my house with a lawyer's letter threatening to sue me for slander on the 14th. If all of social media content was not removed on August 18th, and remember that date, August 18th, I would be sued for slander and held, all that stuff, those lies. Me being the person I am, I didn't remove any of the social content. I kept it up there, and I every day was still posting information about what they had done to my dad. Pictures. I was not going to stop talking about my dad, even after they killed him. On August 18th, about 9:00 in the evening, I'm upstairs in my house. I'm in the shower, and I hear my doorbell ring. And I look out my front window because my bathroom faces the front. And I live in the district of Green Township. The nursing home where they lived, their police district was Cheviot Police. There was a Cheviot police officer with a Green Township officer where I live. And see, in order for an officer to come from another district, they have to get an officer from your district to come with them to your house. And I was arrested.
Really? For not removing the social media?
Oh, no, they didn't say that though, Gail. They didn't say that, but thankfully the judge knew it.
Yeah.
What they did is that they arrested me. It wasn't a physical arrest. I was served a paper that I will have a court summons. Hold on a second, please. I apologize. They arrested me for making a false. Now this, mind you, this is August 18th. They arrested me for a false alarm call that I made on July 22nd using a false name. Now, mind you, from August 18th, they didn't have anything to get me on. What they had to do is, hey, we're going to get her on a call that she made on July 22nd using a false name. Oh. And that's a whole other thing too. And just to jump a little bit ahead, Gail.
But before you jump, Lisa, tell them what the officer said he would do if you did not come downstairs.
Oh, yes. Officer Greg Dietrich. Mm-hmm. Officer Greg Dietrich, who, when we found the bed sores on my father just a couple weeks earlier, and I called 911 to do a police report on the bed sores. Yeah. And I know you probably don't have the ability, but there's claw marks from a hand. Like if you can look up towards the top, there's a finger where fingers dug into his skin. Those four dots, those are finger marks where somebody dug their hand into his back. But and the bed sores get much worse. I don't have the picture to give to Marcia. I had the picture, but I didn't give the picture to Marcia because the bed sore on his rear end was down to the bone. And also, Marcia, you'll see in the medical records the night that we found the bed sores and I called 911, and Officer Greg Dietrich, the officer that arrested me on August 18th, earlier before they killed my father, when I called after discovering these bed sores, he wouldn't respond to the 911 call. And I kept calling 911 multiple times. I gave my name and everything. Officer Greg Dietrich finally called me and said, I'm not coming up there to take pictures and do a police report on just bed sores. I said, just bed? I was just flabbergasted. Like, are you serious?
They're deadly. Bed sores. Yes. Bed sores are deadly.
Right. Cheviot Police refused. Cheviot Police Officer Greg Dietrich, he's no longer with them. He moved out west since then, but he refused to come to there to do a police report on just bed sores. Now, when I called Green Township, and this police, go into that territory. I said, would you do a report if you saw this, if a nursing home in your area and a person had bed sores? They said, of course we would do a police report. I mean, they would have filed a normal police district would have filed a police report if somebody had bed sores and a family member demanded it. But no, Shivia police, the ones who made a false arrest against me, refused to do a police report on the bed sores.
And this was in July?
No, this was in August. Before they killed, he was killed on August. They tried to kill him on August 4th. It didn't work. And then they were successful on it on August 13th.
Okay, but I'm going to take you back again for our listeners. When the police officer came there, he said, if you did not come down and take that, he was going to show up at your father's service.
Exactly.
And arrest you at your father's service.
He said, and I'm talking to this officer outside the window. The poor Green Township cop looked like he didn't want to be there. But Officer Greg Dietrich of Shivia Police said to me, if I didn't come down there to sign this warrant for my arrest, my dad's funeral was on the 18th. My dad's funeral was the next day, right? Mm-hmm. If I didn't come down there to sign that warrant, I will come to St. Martin's Church. That's where his services were held. I will come to that church and I will physically arrest you in front of everyone. So I go out there, I signed it, and then I threw it at him. Felt good too.
So I want to go back and talk about the fact that your mother had told them there were flowers in the room. Now, this is per their records, right? That there were flowers in the room, and she told them to take out all of the flowers in there because her daughter had probably put a camera in there. And later, your friend sent them an edible arrangement that, again, for your father. Again, your mom said, take it out because Lisa probably had them put a camera in there.
And Marcia and Gail, let me ask you something. If your spouse was in a nursing rehab facility and your daughter and you as a loving wife would be worried if a nursing rehab facility and nurses and nurse aides, especially the nurse aides or nurses, are abusing your loved one, would you be upset that your daughter would plant a camera? Which I didn't. Going back, but you would want that, wouldn't you?
No, I mean, for me, you know, we've done it with suspicion of nursing homes where, you know, with my father, where there was an aide that we suspected was abusive and put a camera in the room. I know many people who, when COVID first hit and they knew they weren't going to be able to see their loved ones, that's the first thing they did was put a camera up with fresh batteries. No, I think that's a very normal thing to do.
Unless you have something to hide.
Unless you have something to hide. Unless you have something to hide.
Gail, that's why I bring Marcia on these calls with me, because she kind of reels me in, because I get very upset when, I do apologize.
No,
I
don't
might
apologize.
sound like I know, but I get angry and upset when I go through the story each and every time. And trust me, I want his story out there. If it could save a life, my dad would want that.
Well, but it deserves to be exposed. I mean,
right. And then look at how they incriminated themselves. I mean, look at that. They put in there that my mother and the nursing director was suspicious that I had planted a camera in there. Does that not show you that my mother was having my father killed?
Yeah. What are you trying to hide, right? And I found your explanation of this picture very disturbing too. Like, so people will see, all right, so he has this full beard and hair.
Look at how red his face is, though. I want you to see.
Yeah.
See the full beard? In the hair. And mind you, they were not brushing his teeth daily. They would not let him have showers. He could brush his own teeth, but they would not let him have a toothbrush. Now, the number one killer of people in nursing homes, too, besides the staff, is pneumonia. Oral health is so important. And these nursing homes know if they do not brush their teeth, their oral health will kill them.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can see how much weight he has lost.
Right.
At one
This is when
point,
he's being starved.
at one point, they put it in the records, and it was 25 pounds that he had lost. And he wasn't a big man to begin with.
Right. You can see
And
how skinny he got.
yeah.
And they shaved his beard down to the nub.
Well, Lisa, you want to tell them why they shaved him? His arm, I believe his arms were shaved at one point.
They shaved all of it. They shaved his arms, they cut his beard down, and they cut his hair down. And we took this picture, and I contacted a Green Township because Shivia police were in on this corruption, and they knew that they threatened to arrest me another time because I called about the abuse that was happening to my father. And the police chief, Joe Laley, who's no longer a police chief there, and he was shortly removed from his position after my
don't go there yet. Hold on.
Okay.
Don't go there yet.
But I called, I had talked with a detective from Green Township Police. His name is Detective Mulholland. And I showed him this picture and I told him, I said, they shaved his hair, they shaved his beard, they cut his hair real short, and they shaved his arms. And he said, Lisa, what they're doing is they're removing, the hair follicle holds the amount of drugs, the type of drugs, and for how long they were doing the drugs. He said they're removing the hair so you would not pluck a hair and probably have it tested.
Yeah.
And this picture is the night before the first attempt on his life.
And I want to talk about that, Lisa. So on the 3rd of August, because I'm looking at the records, there's over 100 pages of the records. And when they were giving him lorazepam, which is the same thing as Ativan, every 2 hours for agitation.
Wow.
Well, the fact is, Haldol causes agitation.
Yeah.
But so they're giving him for agitation that they have created. And then it says here by one of the nurses, and 2 of the nurses said this at different times, but he was still anxious and agitated, and that didn't work. So they gave Ativan Intrasol 1 milligram per order. And this was on the 2nd of August at 1842 at hour 20, which, what is that, less than 2 hours, they gave him lorazepam again, 1 milligram. And then at the same time, they gave him another milligram, and his agitation was increased. So then they gave him 1 milligram of Ativan. Then they gave him at 20:01, 1 minute later, morphine sulfate concentrate, 10 milligrams. And
Marcia, this is all on an empty stomach also.
Yeah. And and then at 3 o'clock, so at 3 o'clock in the morning, they gave him more lorazepam. And then at 3:56, they gave him more morphine, 10 milligrams of morphine. Then they gave him Haldol, 0.5 milligrams of that. And that was given every 6 hours. And he was getting the morphine and the Ativan every 2 hours.
And mind you, I want you guys to know, this is a man that would not even take an aspirin in his life because he didn't believe in taking even over-the-counter drugs.
Well, and it says, at some point they tried to give this to him, and he refused. And he refused every single thing they tried to give him: the antibiotics, the anti-nauseas, which they were causing the nausea.
Yeah, they were causing.
Even Ensure, everything that they tried to give him.
They didn't give him any Ensure either, though, because those are all lies.
They say that. But he refused. He kept refusing.
It's all lies. And my father was agitated. They're bold-faced liars.
Well, I believe he was. I believe he was, but I believe they created it
with the Haldol, because the Haldol will create agitation, and then they give him Ativan, and then they give him morphine, and then they give him more Haldol to create the need for the Ativan, and it's like this.
You know what, though? I discovered when he was at the hospital and we were trying to get him discharged, but they couldn't find my mother. He wanted to leave with me. Mm-hmm. And come to find out, a nurse there who is trash like the nurses at this rehab facility, an unethical nurse by the name of Anastasia, gave him Haldol and put lies in the hospital records saying that he was trying to leave and everything. Well, of course he's trying to leave. He was fit.
Yes.
So he's a grown man wanting to leave this place. So what you did is you gave him something against his will, a
Physical restraint.
powerful drug.
Yeah.
Haldol.
Yeah. We see this in so many, like, right, where the Haldol's given, the agitation, then the Ativan, and they don't have any nursing plan around agitation that's non-medical.
You know what it is, Gail and Marcia? You got these nurses that have it made in these facilities. They have like 12 or 15 people per shift that they're supposed to be responsible for. They're understaffed, and they're on their cell phones. You know, I have a picture of one of the nurses. Her name is Katie Teak. I have a picture of her taking selfies of herself while she's working.
Yeah,
I posted those on social media. I'm like, here's what Katie Teak is doing while she's working. Supposed to be taking care of people in this nursing home at night shift, but instead she's taking selfies.
And understaffed.
Right.
And I hear that, you know, and I'm not saying that nurses aren't understaffed. Maybe they are. I don't know. But, and I don't mean to, you know, put everybody in the same bucket, but I think that I am. But I think that if you're working there on the night shift or the weekend shift, which is the worst shift you can get, and I think that's the only job you can get, because I don't think you're qualified to be a regular nurse. And I don't think that these nurses do this, working in hospice, given all these drugs every 2 hours. If they're agitated, well, I'll just give them some more. And then they say, per medical, you know, director's advice, I'm going to give them some more. I don't think they're high quality people. I don't think they can get a job anywhere else. I think it's
also they're too harsh. They get away with murder.
Yeah,
they do.
They drug them. They drug them because they don't want to deal with people.
Right.
They don't want to help them.
Restraint is what they're doing.
A good nurse has a nursing plan per patient that doesn't have anything to do with medications, right? You know, my husband was a good nurse. You know, you go in, you speak to people. It's the human touch, human contact, human intervention. Get the family to assist when they can. So yeah, I would agree. So this was the first attempt on his life, and then you say attempt.
Yes, it did. And it's in the records of Marcia.
Well, I think because he didn't die, because he was a strong man, and he was.
Well, they said he was dying.
Yeah. So
right. And he actually refused at a couple of points in here. It says refused. And then once they got him in a state where he was out, like he's out here, then I think they were just adding all of this and just saying, the record says, oh, he says he was in pain all over. Wow. And I don't believe that for 1 second. Yeah, right. And then that gave the nurses, the ones she's talking about, it gave them carte blanche to give him more, because at that time, I believe that there was an animosity towards Lisa, and they were going to show her, you have no power over this. You have absolutely no control. And they ramped up the drug in him. And they
they had my mother's full permission to hurt my father, abuse him. They had what my mom would do. My mom became friends a year prior with this nursing director. And, you know, the nursing director is the one that found the nurses at Optum Hospice to be the so-called hospice to admit him. My mother became chummy with these nurses, and my mom paid the nursing director off. I know this for a fact. My mother would tell them that my father and I beat her up. Okay, like I said, my mother was severely mentally ill. My mother hated me and my father. She despised my father, and she hated me all my life because I looked like my father and I would defend my father. my mother was so sick, and she gave these nurses, do whatever you want. This Katie Teak especially found enjoyment in, she had me on, right before 4th of July, she had me kicked out of there. She had Shivia police come up there and say that I was not allowed to be up there per my mother. I had to get back in there a couple of days later by an ombudsman program.
So was your dad, the whole time you were having conversations with him, right?
Yes, and he was begging us, me and John, to get him out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And during the first attempt to kill him, he, like Marcia said, it's documented that he had the wherewithal to refuse some of the times they tried to give him the killer medications. But then when he was out, they gave it to him. So
they were always injecting him. Always.
Yeah. So he clearly was in charge of his own mind and did not need to have these decisions made for him, which is very sad.
Right.
The fact that he was even in this facility to begin with, or on hospice to begin with, was crazy, since he wasn't actually terminal even. So take us to the final time how long total was your dad in this facility?
Either June 28th or June 29th, and he was killed on August 13th.
Killed on August 13th. Okay, so
and you know what's sad? At the end, I believe in God, and I think I've become more spiritual since his death. But I finally was like, at least they can't hurt you no more.
Right. Did they allow him to have last rites or any of that?
Oh yeah. The first attempt, they had the last rites. My mother allowed that. But at least they couldn't hurt him. I mean, the only thing that I can look at the silver lining, not this, is that he no longer can be mentally or physically abused by my mother. He can no one can hurt him anymore. And he's with people he loves in heaven who love him.
Mm-hmm.
And not with these monsters.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, tell them, at one point your dad had some of his work colleagues there visiting him, and he told Carol, I'm going to get out of here. Carol, get me out of here. And tell everybody what it was that she's told him at that point.
My dad's work colleagues, they all worked the same. My dad used to work the same shift with them, 7 to 3:30. And what these guys would do, these were his brothers, I mean, his real brother was in New Orleans, but these were his brothers that work. And they would come up every day, and they knew what was happening. They try to keep my dad, his mind good, like they knew what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So they come up and they play cards with them. And my mother, my boyfriend was up there at the time, and he was up there with them, and he said, Lisa, I've seen this happen more than once. Your dad will have visitors, including myself. They must make a call to your mother, and then she comes up there and she sits around watching everything, but she doesn't come to talk to your father or me, and she stays there chattering around like she's the queen bee here up at this place with these nurses, and they all act like she's such a great person. Well, of course she's a great person because she's giving them all money. Okay. But one time they were up there playing cards with my dad, and my dad, out of the corner of his eye, he sees my mom come into the building and talk to one of those nurses and sit there laughing away and all that stuff. He said, Carol, come over here. She stomped over there and she said, you're taking me home today. I am leaving here today. And mind you, there's 4 guys from work sitting around this card table playing cards with him, and they're just sitting there watching it and everything. And my dad said, you are taking me home today. She she broke character, her fake, acting all happy and stuff. She broke character. She leans over my father, and I know this look well because she would snarl when she would talk to us. And she would say, Bill, and she said to my father, she said, Bill, you're never leaving here. You are dying here. And then she stomped off and left. And the guys, and here's the thing, my father, in typical Bill Papania fashion, I'm sorry, you guys. John was like, Lisa, John's my ex-boyfriend. He goes, Lisa, your dad sat there apologizing. You guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way she acted. This was the typical story of my dad's life, apologizing. Here she is telling my dad, he hides his feelings. Oh, okay, I'm going to die here. Can you imagine hearing somebody tell you who's controlling your life, you can't leave a facility, that you're going to die there? You can't go home to the house that you paid for, that you worked all your life for, your own home, your car, everything you love. You're not allowed back there because your mentally ill wife told you you're going to die here. But instead of being upset, he apologizes to his friends. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry she acted that way.
Because he's a gentle man.
A beautiful, gentle soul.
The day that he died on the 13th of August, were you with him? Were you allowed to be with him, hold his hand? And
no, guess what? I was there. Okay. So on August 13th, I'm at work. So is my boyfriend. He gets the call from my uncle. They didn't tell my boyfriend. My mother didn't tell us. My boyfriend goes, Lisa, Larry, who's my dad's brother in New Orleans. My uncle couldn't leave New Orleans at the time because his wife was dying. Okay. So my uncle was on the phone constantly every single day with us, the nursing home, trying to get information. Of course, they wouldn't give him any information, but getting all this information from us. He's a former priest himself. On the day that they killed my father, my boyfriend called me at work and said, Lisa, Larry just called me and said that the nursing home called him. He called the nursing home and they said, oh, he's dying. So you've got to get up there. You've got to get up there now. So me and John both raced up there to meet my dad, to be up there. My friend, I called my girlfriend, Nikki. I told her to meet me there. I get there and my dad's cousins are there. Billy Ray, Lucy Ray, Angie, and a couple others. Okay. My brother's there from California. Now, mind you, my mother had pitted me and my brother against each other, so we didn't even talk. But my brother came and my dad's cousin, Angie, told me, she goes, I was talking to your brother. He said he just flew in last night. I said, how'd he know that dad was dying today? She goes, I know. I wondered that too. So, and my dad's cousin, Lucy's like, I'm calling Carol. I'm trying to get a hold of her. She won't answer her phone. Well, my mother had been in contact with the nursing home. My mother, though, stayed away purposely while he was so-called dying. We were there, myself, my friend, my boyfriend, and 6 of my dad's cousins were there with my father while he was so-called dying. In the meantime, 3 times, 2 nurse aides, Heather Steiner and Tricia Fulton, nurse aides who cannot touch needles, do nothing. They are there to take care of the patients. They are not allowed to have any contact with needles, nothing like that. 2 nurse aides kicked us out of his room 3 times. We had to sit outside the room while they went in that room behind a closed door. Why we allowed that, I have no idea. But in the meantime, the owner of the nursing home facility, Aaron Kibble, was there. He came all the way from Miami, Florida to be there. The nursing director, Jennifer, was there, and the social service director, nurse Amanda, was there. And they're just walking around, just smiling and laughing and everything. And my friend Nikki even said, do you see them staring at you, don't you? And I said, yeah, I seen it. Well, okay. But then we get kicked out of the room 3 different times. On the 3rd time, we're in the hallway right outside my dad's room while the 2 nurse aides are in there alone with them. They come out a 3rd time with a red hazardous bag in their hand. Heather Steiner did. She had a hazardous red bag in her one hand and a needle in the other. And they yell, And I even said to Nikki, I said, Nikki, she's got a needle in her hand. She saw that I saw that she had a needle. She put it down real quick in the bag, and they took off running down the hallway. Patient and screaming. Patient died. Patient expired and took his last breath.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So we all run into the room.
That callousness.
Right. They did it to nurse aid. And then all of a sudden, me and John and my brother and Nikki, we ran into the room as fast as possible. My dad's cousins are older. They're in his age range, and they took a little bit of time to get in there. I run into the room, and we're all me and John and Nikki and my brother in there. And my dad, I'm not kidding you, I'll never forget this. He was in the bed. His head was so, like he was looking up to the heavens, but his neck was pushed back so far. And I had spoken to someone in the medical field. They said, Lisa, that shot it killed him. And it was so instant. And his head went up to the heavens like he was looking. I mean, his head was at such a grotesque angle. And I was just crying. I was like bawling. I was like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I tried to save you. I couldn't stop it. And I was crying to my dad. I felt so bad. I couldn't stop this.
But Lisa, you tried everything that you could do, and it was not within your control.
But it's not right. Two nurse aides, these trashy, dirty nurse aides, were able to kill my father.
I am so sorry.
My dad would never have let this happen to me. And I failed. I know I was stuck.
No, Lisa, even after all of this happened and you went to court, and for the call that you made, and you went to court and told your story, this gave you an opportunity. You told the judge the story, and the judge said, I hope that in the future, if I'm ever in this situation, that I have a daughter who loves me as much as she loved her dad, and would go to the measures that she went to. Now that's somebody who didn't even know you.
After he found me not guilty, Judge Greenberg, he said, we had to stand, I went to court. Cheviot police, they kept calling for continuances because they didn't have, what they did was file a false charge, and they had to look for anything they could to get me on, and they had nothing.
Right,
so they kept filing continuances. And finally, on the last time we went to court, Judge Greenberg, after he found me not guilty, after going through a whole court proceeding, Judge Greenberg says to me, he said, Lisa, he called me by my formal name, Melissa. Melissa, if I should ever be in the position that your father was in, I would hope my daughter would advocate for me the same way you advocated for your father.
That's right.
And then that's when my lawyer told me, he said, okay, Lisa, go out into the hall. We were the last case of the day in the whole courthouse. It was 3:00, and by 3:00, the courthouse was empty. So my lawyer, Hal, he said, Lisa, you and John go out in the hallway. So then me and John are out in the hallway. And about 20 minutes later, there was only the court stenographer in that room, the judge, my lawyer, the prosecutor, and the cop.
Yep.
20 minutes later, I don't know what that judge said to that cop and that prosecutor, but those two people walked past me and John. Both faces were as red as you could be, stomped past me. I mean, literally just stomped past me about 20 to 30 minutes later, just angry. And then shortly after, my lawyer comes out, and he's like, everything's taken care of. I told you. And he couldn't tell me details, but he just said, everything's been taken care of, Lisa. And then I found out shortly after, the police chief and the officer that filed the false arrest on me, not Greg Dietrich, but Robert Ewell, Both Robert Ewell and Office and Police Chief Joe Laley were. Joe Laley was retired, and Robert Ewell was no longer a police officer.
Right.
Amen.
I don't know.
Once you perjure yourself, and a judge finds that as an officer, and they find that you perjured yourself, the prosecutor has to disclose that to any jury that you ever are testifying in front of. So it pretty much ends your career as a cop.
You know, that police chief was given the option to. What makes me sick though is I want Cheviot Police have a Facebook page. And like I said, I've been watching it ever since. And shortly after it was announced, and there was no party, nothing like that. Oh, Police Chief Joe Laley has retired, and this man was my age. He was nowhere near retirement age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very political office. It's a very all political patty. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm sorry for being so emotional.
No, don't apologize. Don't apologize. It's very important that these stories be told, and it's very important that people. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who will resonate with what you said, because I know for the protocol deaths during the COVID protocol deaths, one of the commonalities is the police are used like.
They protect them.
Gestapo, yeah. So
they protect the nursing home staff, not the residents,
not the patients or the residents. And one of our goals at Betrayal Project USA is to have legislation that has required police training in patient rights, and especially resident, like nursing home. They're a resident too. I mean, that's their home, right? So. In hospitals, people have rights, and nursing homes. So no, it's very important part of that story. And I'm glad that it ended up the way that it did.
But can you tell me though, how does law enforcement stand behind that, where they will not, I mean, there's been people that have been there's a Facebook friend, I'm not going to call her out by name because I don't know if she would like that. Her mom was beaten up, and law enforcement refused. I mean, why the staff does what they do? Because they know they cannot be held accountable.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with immunity. Right. Immunity is a big part of it. Immunity in the police, immunity in nobody should have immunity. Immunity shouldn't be a thing, because when immunity happens, then people do bad things. But it is also the degradation of the hiring and society. The further society gets away from God, that's what I noticed.
Yes,
that many of them are not, Christian. The further society gets away from God, and the less people that believe in God. If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the consequences of your actions, right? And so there's that part of it. And so, and there's a whole lot of things that make people that way. And with healthcare has always been going downhill this way. My husband learned to be a nurse. His first experiences were way back in the day with the Sisters of Mercy and the Sisters of Charity.
Is that in what state was that?
Texas.
Okay.
Texas. But back in the day, hospitals, and I don't know if hospice really existed back then, but they were charitable. They were completely charitable. They weren't corporations at all. Insurance companies didn't exist. They went on these events to raise money and treat the poor. And it was the whole person, mind, body, and soul. And they took their time, and the human touch was very much valued. And that's how he learned to be a nurse and all of that. And even he saw it start to degrade when it became very much about profit, and turning bodies and turning beds like you turn tables at a restaurant. And so there's a lot of things that go into the why. And along the way, medical staff definitely lost their virtue. And like Marcia said, the people that work in those types of environments are not very good nurses.
Right.
Most of them are not very good nurses, and because they can't get a job in high end places. And
Right.
many of the good nurses and the good caregivers and stuff have gone private to, just go into private homes and that type of thing, because they don't want to they don't want to do things that compromise their soul.
But you know what? You just said it, Gail. You know what? I believe that they think they're untouchable and they don't worry about their soul. That's the thing. It's like, and I've said this ever since this happened. Okay, I'll be honest with you, Gail. The only reason I don't get revenge is because I want to see my father and my loved ones again. I don't have to worry about my mother because I know she's in hell. But my father, I know he's in heaven. And that's why trust me, I have wanted to take revenge. I've even actually ran into the nursing director who orchestrated it all at Myers. And I had to walk away. I was on the phone with a friend. She made me, Lisa, just walk away, turn around, walk away. I want to see my dad again.
Yeah. I understand. I'm a survivor of attempted hospital homicide. My husband was arrested and prosecuted for saving my life. I get it. I have the same struggles, and that is the thing that separates us from what that is, whatever that is. It's not from God. And so I I know one thing: you telling your dad's story everywhere you can and making his story known matters. Other people who have this story standing up with you, and Marcia and everyone else telling their hospice stories, people standing up telling their COVID protocol death and survivor stories, or their shot stories, their medical tyranny stories. All of that matters. And we are creating a movement. We are creating a movement, Lisa, to change this, to get accountability, to bring awareness, and to change this. And it's going to take all of us. It's going to take every single person who had a loved one that suffered, every person who survived. God had you survive for a reason. That it's going to take us getting together. As hard as it was to tell your story, everybody needs to do it. And so that is our goal. And it takes a lot of, as you know, because you just told your story, it takes a lot of moral courage to do so. And so, and after this interview, we'll make sure that you can connect with the things that we're doing, because I think that will certainly help. I would like to wrap up with some things about what you would tell others who are going through, because this is still, this happens a lot.
Every day.
Every day, every single day.
And you know what? It doesn't discriminate on age either, because I have a Facebook friend who was a POA of her sister, and her sister was in her early 40s, late 30s, something like that, and they euthanized her. I have another Facebook friend, her young teenage daughter was euthanized.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't age, income, none of it matters. So what would you well, for people who've had this happen, I'm hoping you would say, tell your story. Put your story in, see if your friends will put their stories in. But in this is to either Lisa or Marcia. If somebody's going through this right now and they're trying to save a loved one, they're trying to, I know it makes it hard if you're not the medical power of attorney. I had that with my dad. What would you tell them?
I'm going to tell you what happened when this all started happening. I reached out to Casey Kasem's daughter. What is her name? I forget her name. Carrie Kasem. I reached out to her Facebook page and I sent her a message because I remember her story from what happened with her father and her stepmother. I reached out, sent her a message, and a very kind woman from Carrie Kasem's group reached out to me, and she put me in touch with that. Marsha, who is that guy that is a former hospice nurse?
Ron Panzer.
Yeah, Ron Panzer. She put me in touch with Ron Panzer, and he gave me the brutal, honest truth. And he was a very kind man to speak to me, and I appreciate it. But he told me something I didn't want to hear, but he was right 1000%. Once your loved one is stuck in this system, they are not, once they're admitted to hospice, they're not going to get out alive. He said, but it is your duty to spread the word. Right. Call these institutions out, call the facilities, call all of the people involved, and speak on behalf of your loved one and spread the word, because it's now your obligation. You're not going to get, he told me, you're not going to get your father out. No. He's going to die, which, you know, it did happen, but it's your obligation now to spread the word. And you know what? I tell my dad's story. I take my anger and my frustration, because I get those Facebook memories and I post them, and I go on these rants and I say how evil, and I go on these, but you know what? I don't care how crazy I look. My father was the only parent I have. I love him. He is not here to say his story. I am his daughter and I'm his voice. And I am going to, till the day I die, tell everyone by name, facility, who murdered my father.
And that's very important. I am a big believer in name them and shame them. And I do the same when everywhere I tell my story, I name the doctors, name the nurses, name the hospital, name the police.
Make people aware.
Name them and shame, because and it's the public's right to know. It is the public's right to know who these people are, so that they can't hide in the shadows and do evil. Marsha, do you have any closing words?
Of course I do. As I always say, knowledge is power. And if you see something that you don't think is right, there's a talking one day and the next day they're slumped over in their chair and they're not eating, or they're slurring their language, trust your gut and get the medical records while your loved one is alive, whether this is in the hospital or if you do sign up for hospice, which I would never recommend. And then get the medical records and see what medication they're given, and tell them if your loved one is not in pain, they do not need morphine. And morphine will make them anxious. They don't have to have Ativan. There are other ways to keep someone from being anxious, you know, just holding their hand, showing them pictures, playing soft music, whatever kind of music they like, Christian, country, hip hop, whatever it is. Spend the time with them, work towards calming them instead of giving them drugs to do that. So trust your gut. And we have a Facebook group called Murdered by Hospice. And we have people there. Lisa's on there. And we have 7,000 people that are in that group. And you can come to us and you can ask us questions. We'll be totally honest with you. And they will paint a picture about hospice being compassionate. And they are not. There might be some that are. None of the ones that I have talked to, thousands of people, none of them have found one. They will murder your loved one. So trust your gut. Knowledge is power. Research.
Thank you, Marsha. And I hope people will share this story, share other stories, help fuel our mission. There's a lot of ways to get involved. We have a shop. We have donate. We have a volunteer. You can join the fight. There's so many ways to get involved. It's very important to tell your story if you have one. That's one of the most important things, is tell your story. Be public. Don't be afraid to be public. And come to us for help. We have support groups. We have all sorts of stuff that we we offer. So so please take a look at our website and share the information. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate.
And there is a really awesome resource out there that if you don't want to search for the information, my book is out there. It's called Betrayed by Hospice and Healthcare, and the information, ton of resources that are in there, as well as on the Betrayal Project. They have a resource section, and you can find many other people that can help you.
Yeah.
So,
Marsha, also tell them too, though, that the Murdered by Hospice group, even if you don't join, it is a public forum that people can read from, even if they're not a member of the Facebook page.
true.
Yeah, that one is, and we, so Marsha's group is public. There's 7,000, over 7,000 people now in that. And then we also have a Facebook group, which you can find on our website, the link to it. And that is a private group. That is a private group. And so, so you can have the best of both worlds there. And me and Marsha can both be found on Twitter as well. X, we used to be Twitter. We put a lot of information out there, and we have Saturday spaces and on these topics and all of that. So thank you, ladies, for joining me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Telling your story, and Gail for having the platform to allow us to come on. Thank you.
Thank you both.